Welcome to Exceptional Effort Business Sunday. Today we're talking about finding the right people and looking beyond the CVs and the LinkedIn profiles. And I'd probably like to open with this one in being what I would call, from my experience, is being clear about what you want. From my experience, I've noticed in a couple of organisations that I work with where they weren't, and this is at one of them in particular was at the CEO level. They hired a CEO but didn't have a clear directive as to what they were looking. Well, they did have a clear directive, but it wasn't in line with where they were going as an organisation. And as it turned out, they had this person as a CEO for about 18 months, then let that person go because it was just detrimental to the business. So one of the things that I've found really important in finding the right people is before you even start looking at the people, is to be clear about or choose what you want. As would be, I would say, from my strategies of working is to make that choice. And I think that's really critical in identifying the first step as to finding the right people. Do you want to add to that?
Yeah, so you're saying making sure you know what you want before you go looking.
Correct. Yeah. So from particularly in that example, it was with the CEO that they appointed. Some of the basis behind the board's decision wasn't really in line with they were under some political pressure at the time, and so they were trying to appease that, and so they appointed someone to fill some of that pressure they were feeling. But this person, whilst they were very competent within the company, they were very senior in the company, they didn't have the required skill to move the business forward, and actually it became detrimental where they lost a lot of work and it the business went backwards for a period of time. They were operating, they hadn't been clear. They had been clear about what they wanted, but it wasn't in line with where they wanted to go, and that was quite detrimental to the company.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, I've got a client at the moment who identified that she needs a personal assistant, for a better word, and it's almost like exactly you create not so much a job description, but you want to visualize the person and the type. It's the type of person. I mean, we're all got personalities. You know, we all, as I say, we spend most of our waking hours at work, so it's the personality that you're looking for, plus the skill set. So there's different. I guess there's different ticker boxes. It's, as you said, it's not just whether you've got the right tertiary qualifications, the right experience. There's a whole mixing pot of things that goes into that to find the right person, which then leads on to the training and the onboarding and a whole host of other questions that bubble up.
When I first started my business, I got a lot of requests of saying, "Pete, we only want you to come and teach." And so I tried to search for someone, and I was butting my head for so long. And then I had to drop that and say, everyone else, as you just said, Julian, has got special talents, their own individual characters, etc. And so I had to find someone with the flair of their own story, their own delivery, but still ran through the same gates as what I wanted to run through. But so once I started to look for other qualities and traits in other people, I found those missing links, which helped me grow the business.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing is, I know maybe I'm jumping the gun, but the actual interview process is always a very interesting discussion, and there's textbooks and videos of how to interview people, but that can also be the make or break of making the right or wrong decision based on what you've got in front of you. And sometimes you only have a small window. Yes, you can get them back for 2, 3, 4 interviews, which is overkill. We should be able to work it out a lot quicker than that. And the other thing is, I remember when I did my first interview, I was 21 or something. I was working for a large sewing machine company, and the lady who was the consultant said, "You can do this one." I'll never forget, like yesterday, I just sat there and almost died because I was just sitting there enjoying the ride, and I had to do my first interview. So the interviewer can be under a lot of pressure, as the interviewee can be at times, if it's for whatever reason.
I actually look forward to interviewing people.
I do now, but back then I didn't.
Yeah, I used to interview for Coles and Safeway for butchers and apprentices, and I enjoyed it. I wanted to find out as much as I could in a short amount of time, ask them the hard questions to see how they would respond. But, you know, they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but you do, because you wouldn't have picked the book up. So it's about looking through the book. And as you said, Julian, it's really hard in a short amount of time, you know, in that 15, 20-minute interview.
And the other thing I've also found is that people will, and I've sat in with interviewers and different things, is that the art is also getting the interviewee to do most of the talking, whereas the interviewer can take control because they want to blow their own trumpet. And if it's a half-hour interview, I've seen people talk for 20 minutes of that, or even 25 minutes, and I'm going, are you serious? You don't know anything about that person. You let them speak for 2 seconds and then you've just projected all over them. So how are you going to make a decision? Then they go, oh, I don't know which person to pick. It's like, well, you didn't listen. You didn't ask the right questions.
It's a bit like the Japanese in you know, the Art of War, Sun Tzu. You speak less and listen more, and you find out a lot more about the person, especially in meetings.
Yeah, well, that's God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, as I say.
That's it.
Is our friend Damian disappeared?
No, I'm here. Can you still see me?
No, he's
okay.
there.
I'm listening. Coming back to the point that you mentioned earlier, in relation to the personality, and I know from my perspective, I've hired a lot of people, and the basis of that hiring has come a lot to do with the character of the person as opposed to their skill set. Right, so I've looked, you know, they'll submit a CV and they've got all these qualifications and skills and and things like that they put forward. But then what I'm actually looking is when I speak to them is what was their what is their character. An example of that was there was one guy, and this stood out for me particularly. He was from Africa, and I was talking to him about his story, and it said, "Can you tell me about your commitment and drive?" And he told me, he said, I grew up in Africa. It was in an area where it was war-torn by these militants, and my village was attacked, and I ran away from that, and I decided I was going to get out. So I walked. Somehow he made his way to China, and then while in China, he studied some engineering and sort of the claim side of construction as well. So he worked in there for China. Then he went to Hong Kong, where he met his wife in Hong Kong, and then he moved to Australia. And I was looking at that story going, wow, if that's not a commitment to getting where you want to know, overcoming adversity, I was just really impressed. And I did hire him, and he was just so amazing in his commitment and drive to overcome problems, that kind of thing. And that's one of the key things I look for is how committed are the people, what is their history in what they've done that shows that they'll overcome obstacles, that they'll commit to what they're doing and keep pushing through. So I really look for that those kind of character traits which show that tenacity and drive to move forward.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Damian, where you look at, you know, what's their tenacity, what have they overcome? Someone who's cruised, maybe for a better word, through certain things, you know, they might be very good, but they've never faced what I call adversity, those left field things that come in, and that's the real, you know, how you deal with those tough decisions, which raises, you know, one of the questions that I often get asked, and which is not so much a debate, is tertiary qualified versus non-tertiary qualified versus experienced and non-experienced. But, you know, the tertiary qualified person, the only thing that I view that as part of the process is the fact, well, it depends what they've done, whether they've done it part-time, but if you go through a tertiary qualification, it does take some sort of discipline and commitment to complete that degree or post degree. And I know my kids are at uni, and I've watched them do various, some of them are like walk in the park, and I said, are you really at uni? Because they do the lectures online now and things like that. But the fact is, they've still got to turn up, and they've got to do certain things to be disciplined. So sometimes, depending on the industry, that can be over or under emphasised, is that tertiary qualification.
I found from my experience, because I actually originally went to a trade school when they existed, and then from there I joined the army. Then did a little bit of work in construction, came back to Melbourne, and then I did started a commerce degree, and got that higher education later in life. And what I did realise in that, when you talk about whether it's tertiary or non-tertiary, yes, there is a commitment to doing that. But I also found that knowledge that I gained was actually, there's a broader knowledge that was gained. And it's not so much whether it's tertiary education, and this is one of the character traits I look for, is how committed is that person to learning. So it's not necessarily whether they've done a tertiary education, and I ask them, what study do you do? And not just, have you done 20 years ago, but what do you do now? What do you like to learn? What do you like to read? And I'm trying to assess, again, from that character point of view, what is their commitment to learning, to improving, to see whether they're committed to improving themselves, and whether they're committed to learning more about what they, about their area of where they work in, because that part of business is that growth and evolution. And as your competition increases or improves, if you don't improve, you're going to fall behind. And this is where it's really important, I believe, for that continual improvement process. So I look for that. Tertiary education is one aspect, but it's more, for me, it's a broader thing of their commitment, their attitude towards improving their own skills, both personally and also to their skills in their area of expertise.
Coming from a martial art karate background, I've been doing it for about 37 years. So, and the more I know what I know less because of how much I know. There's more to learn every day, and that's why if there's diplomas or programs out there on emotional awareness, anger management, conflict resolution, the stuff that's being taught today supersedes what was taught 30, 40 years ago. So I do believe in that, guys, that we've got to keep continually learning and drive. We've got to drive that passion, otherwise we'll just redo what we've done years ago and we won't evolve. So, but yeah, finding those people to in a short window of an interview is hard, but then the continual growth that you have with them while you work with them should be able to feed off one another. I believe that 4 out of 5 people have to work, and there's that 1 out of 5 that wants to work. And I don't work. I love what I do, but to find that with people is difficult.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that brings up the, you call it the 9 till 5 clock watchers who, turn up a minute before 9. They take their time and they're out the door at 5, and they not so much don't care. It's a job to them. It's a means to an end. We've all got to pay bills. We need cash flow. So those people don't do. So they don't do a bad job. They don't do a great job. They do the job. So you could argue, okay, and that's the difference between the people that I think, as you said, that they kind of care. They really go to that next level of caring, and you can see that. And they're often the people that outperform, and magically they get promoted and somehow do well. What a surprise! So it's that caring attitude. I like that. 1 out of 5 is probably there, and the other 4 are ticking boxes.
I think that falls under the category again of the character, which part of my interview process is to assess their level of passion for what they do. So it's It's about, what are, how much do you like your job? I mean, that you do. And as you said, Pete, it's not you don't work, you actually love what you do. And one of those questions I literally asked them point blank is, do you love your job and why? And I get them to talk about that. So, and from that, I get an assessment of how committed are they to their job, or how much do they really enjoy doing it? Are they just doing it, like you say, because they have to, and it's a 9 to 5, and they'll take whatever they can? And part of how you assess, I find how I assess that is talking about the future of what they want to achieve. Because then when you ask them those questions of, where would you like to be in 5 years' time or whatever, if there's a progress, a growth process that they talk through, that in 5 years they want to be, or even in a year, they want to be beyond where they are, that shows a commitment to learning new things. It shows a passion for what they do, and that they actually like what they do. So, and that they have ambition to move forward. And that kind of ambition points to that character trait of them actually wanting to do a good job and do that little bit more. Because again, it's like you say, you can have someone that turns up 9 to 5 and that's what they're paid for, which is great that they do that. Ideally, what you want in an organisation is you want people that are passionate about what they do, that want to drive forward, and that are willing to do that little bit extra because they want something more at the end of that. And that's where that, from the promotion side of things, people get, when they demonstrate that they can do more, then they get paid more. And someone that starts the job with that intention of wanting to be promoted, it indicates that they're likely to put in that little bit extra effort because they've got that goal to move forward. So I found that's a real key from my end, is to talk about the future of what they want to achieve, because that highlights those character traits of whether they're going to be driving forward or whether they're just going to come in for the 9 to 5.
I've got heaps to respond to that, Damian. There is that, well, what did I do yesterday to get where I am today? If you've got that attitude, I don't care, then all of a sudden at 22 you wake up and you go, hang on, now I do care, and I've missed out on all these opportunities to better myself. And then on the flip side of that, we've got all these young people in starting university and stuff like that and getting qualified and not wanting to do the bottom grade jobs to get to where they want to go. And I've found that with a lot of people. I don't know, we're the most overeducated country in the world that don't want to do what we want to do. It's hard. It's a real flip for me, because people want it now, but they don't want to do the steps to get there. And I interviewed one bloke one time. I said, where do you want to be in 5 years' time? And he said, I want to be sitting where you're sitting. So you do get those, jack in the boxes, but sometimes I think that people, especially younger people, are a little bit more entitled. I may upset a few people here, but I think they are a little bit more entitled and they want what they want now, and some don't want to work for it.
I think one of those, just touching on what you said there, Pete, and you said, what are they willing to do that? One of the questions I asked him, talking about that point of, how do you know whether they got that passion for the job? One of the things that I ask in an interview is, what are you willing to do outside of your role? Because we're employed to do a certain role, but it's like, well, I know from my perspective in my work that there's nothing that I won't do if it needs to be done, and nothing is beneath me in the work that I do, and has never been in any of the roles that I've undertaken when I was employed as well. So, and that's one of the questions I asked in the interview: what are you willing to do outside of your role? Because then the answer that they use, and their answering of that question gives a great indication as to how committed they are to the organisation as a whole. Sorry, Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, just actually on that point, that it brings up that discussion of departmentalisation. I do this job, and if you see a work colleague struggling and you've got not much to do, there's the team. It brings up the teamwork and the team culture of helping the business achieve its objectives versus, I don't do that. The classic is a distribution business. or small, company where a truck might come in and there's two blokes in the warehouse, and they need to unload or load. I've owned a business where we go down and we all help from me down. And that's the other thing is, don't just send down two people. There are times when a business leader or owner does things that, as I say, don't ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. And that brings up, I guess, a whole another discussion about leadership and that. But coming back to the right people, the other question that would be interesting to get your thoughts on is the reference checking. So you've got someone there, we kind of like them, we want to give them the job. And, I've seen examples where people don't do proper reference checking because they're so enthralled and made their mind up that they rush out and, down track they go, oops, I should have done the reference checking, which is a very important part of the whole process that I've found over the years.
Yeah. From my perspective, I must say that I have been guilty of the non-reference checking as detailed. Partly, and this might sound like hyperbole, but I've actually got very good at making a character assessment because I really do focus on the person's character as opposed to the reference. I do make reference calls, but yeah, to be fair, I must admit I probably haven't done that as diligently as other people would do. But on the converse side of not doing that, I've rarely had people that haven't met my expectations of when they've started. Not saying I haven't had a bad hire, but it's been quite rare that has happened. But reference checking is really important. It is really important, and it shouldn't be underrated. And so it does point to, and it's important to check the references as well, is to think broader. And this is where LinkedIn and those kind of things come in handy, because you can see a trail there. So a lot of times it's very rare someone will put a reference on there, will give you a reference that's going to give them a bad review. However, you can look a little bit deeper now and look at LinkedIn, which I have done. I might not have done it often, but I have looked at someone's background on publicly and spoken to someone within an organisation saying, have you worked with so and so and what were they like, that wasn't on their list of references, to get a background where I wasn't sure.
Sorry, Julian, on that, I was actually getting some work done on the house, and I got some quotes, and a couple of blokes come around, and I had a chat to them about the quote, and they said, check out these references of houses that I've done before. So I've actually jumped online and searched him socially as well, and some of the pictures he had on his social media, straight away I've just gone, no thanks, I'm not going to. So it's pretty hard not to be sort of sourced and found out your true self. There's always that imprint that we leave.
Yeah. And we see that with a lot of the younger generation who are out partying and having just been normal. They whack it on social media, and 5 years later, as you just said, they go, thanks but no thanks. Is that fair or unfair? Obviously, each case depends what it is. So it's good and bad.
Yeah. I think, and the other question I was going to ask in relation to finding the right people was emotional intelligence. Is that, from your perspective, I know from my perspective, it's one that I look at again very deeply as to how, and I ask people, when you're in a situation where you've got someone being abusive to you, and how do you react? And I ask questions along those lines to get a feel for what their level of emotional intelligence is. And from my perspective, I've many times been in meetings where I've been verbally attacked, insulted, and it's done as a negotiation tactic to throw you off your game. And this is at high level. It certainly happens quite a lot there, and they can be subtle, it can be right in your face, and directly being called names in meetings, and part of a way to get me to waver. And from my perspective, that just goes straight over my head, because I see it as a noun, and that's all it is. It's a noun to get a prescribed response, so I don't give that response. But in my interviewing of people, I'm really trying to assess what their level of emotional intelligence is, because I want to know anyone can behave well in a pristine, perfect situation. When you're under pressure, it becomes a different circumstance. We start to revert to our more what we call animal instinct, where we start to become very reactionary. And the higher your level of emotional intelligence, the less chance you have of falling back into that animal type reaction. So how important do you put on that level of emotional intelligence when looking for the right people?
I put it right up there, Damian. It's at the end of the day, that's the difference between, you know, a great person and a good person. And often you try and extract as much as you can in the interview process. But the other thing is, as someone comes into the role, when they're in the day-to-day, that's when you can really assess that person. But as you said, you've only got a short window to do that. But that's how you move ahead. Which the other thing that raises is, and I've been caught out of this, that when you do make a bad hire or you choose the wrong person, is your gut tells you very quickly. But we always give them the benefit of the doubt, and hopefully they'll come good. But 99% of the time, 6 or 8 months down the track, you are unfortunately asking that person to move on, and you kick yourself going, I was right 6 months ago, I should have, but we want to be nice, we give people the benefit of the doubt, but that's just been my experience that, sometimes we do get the wrong person, and you do unfortunately need to move on it quickly. It's been my experience.
Yeah, to decipher the emotional intelligence from the mental intelligence, to me, I see that as a unit, as a picture, and something will, as you said, feel it in the gut, that sixth sense. But yeah, it's these days, even with the days of emailing and all that sort of stuff, and that's another thing as well, is how do we find out a lot about a person by what they send to you in emails as well. Text messages can be misread. But yeah, that emotional intelligence is at a high level that should be looked at.
Yeah.
That gut feeling that you mentioned, you both mentioned there. I mean, for me, that's a big part in my interview process. And literally nowadays, I'd say 90% of the time, I will know within 30 seconds whether I'm going to hire that person. Just from having done the background work first, going through the information, having had a look at online at what their experience is and what they've done, and then meeting the person, and just it's a really trust that intuition from that perspective, and part of that is normally how they respond to questions. The very first question, what I look for is, are they responding directly, or are they being cagey or giving vague answers? And for me, it's like if someone knows what they're doing and not only knows what they're doing, but knows who they are, when I ask them a question about them, about their experience and their character, a person that knows that will respond directly. From my experience, will respond directly straight up front. Someone that's unsure will kind of give a wishy-washy type answer. So normally I start with a really hard question straight up. And usually it's tell me why you're right for the job. And it's like, tell me why you're right for this job. And if they give a vague and wishy-washy type answer, it's like, well, for me, I feel straight away that they're not going to be right in this position. But if they come back and go, I'm right for this job because I've done this experience here, I love what I do, and they rattle off a whole bunch of stuff, immediately it gives a strong indication that they're the right person for this job. So that's one of my key questions I ask straight up. You tell me why you're right for this job.
Very good. I like that.
I have asked before, what is the worst thing about you? What lets you down? What's one of those character traits that lets you down, and have you recognised it, hopefully, and are you willing to work on it? Because we're all not 100% perfect, and that's how I try and, through my work, better people is pull the thing out that's not working for you, right? Look at it. if you can't fix it, outsource it, get it fixed as best you can and put it back inside you to make yourself a better person. So if we can be honest, I think that's the biggest thing. And the older we get, the more stuff we see through when people aren't being honest, I feel, because of experience.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah, that what you're talking about, that honesty, it's being honest with yourself, and that for the person that you're interviewing, are they demonstrating to you that they are being honest with themselves, or they are honest with themselves? Some people have a facade and they'll pretend to be, and they'll hide things and from themselves, and that makes it challenging for them to do a good job. If they're not going to be honest with themselves, then it's hard for them to perform well, while engaged with you. And coming back to your point before too, Pete, about hiring contractors as well. I mean, it's not just employees, but in your daily life, how do you find the right people to do work for you in other aspects as well? The same principles apply. And if that person is not going to be honest with themselves, is demonstrating or indicating that they're not honest with themselves, it's a good indication that they're probably not going to be doing a great job for you, either as an employee or as someone you're contracting in to do work for you.
I teach in VCAL, which is where you get a pass or a fail in year 11 and 12, but you don't get a leaving score, to go to university. And most of them are tradies. They want to be, plumbers, builders, etc. And one question I ask them is, would you employ you to work for you? So if you turned up at your house and you were interviewing yourself to do the job, would you employ you? Which really throws them on the back foot straight up and makes them scratch their head a bit. Example, shortcuts, showing up late, all those 1%ers that we look for in good employees and good contractors, trade people.
Yeah. Those type of questions that some people are really good. I mean, a similar question that I asked, coming back to what you've said there, Pete, and to what I mentioned before about, tell me, what the job is one thing I've said before in an interview, and I said to them up front, I said, we only employ superstars here. Are you a superstar? And that reveals that character. Does that person believe in themselves? Are they really? Is their self-esteem intact? Is their ego intact? You want someone with a strong ego, someone that does believe in themselves. I'm not talking about an ego where they're arrogant and just pounding just about how wonderful they are, but someone that has a strong belief in their ability to succeed. And those type of questions, tell me why you're a superstar. That does tap into that ego. Do they believe in themselves, especially in a sales role? If you're looking for someone for sales, you want someone with a strong ego that believes in themselves, because they're going to cop immense amount of flack and rejection. They've got to have the resilience to stand up and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, and that raises that whole personality thing of the different. You just mentioned a salesperson is going to have a different ego or different positioning compared to, say, an accountant. So that's the other thing that needs clarity and, different horses for courses, as you say.
Even an undertaker, Julian.
Yeah. Well, that comes back to the point from the start of the meeting, is being clear about what you need for the organisation, and this can be really important to have that breadth of knowledge within your organisation and different personalities to work together as a team. So, because ideally you want people that bring different knowledge but are able to work together. And I remember yesterday you and I were talking, Pete, and I mentioned the movie Bohemian Rhapsody. And when you look at that movie, one thing that stood out for me in relation to the band Queen was, the way it was portrayed in the movie anyway, was that they had these different personalities and they had different ideas, and they actually clashed with those ideas, but they had that fine balance where they clashed about the idea, but it drove them, all of them, to be that little bit better. So, and this is coming back to that character trait of someone that has the that attitude, that strong ego to say, hey, I believe in this, but same token too, it's tempered with a little bit of humbleness to go, okay, I can learn from this as well. So it's a combination of I believe in myself and this is what I think, and at the same time I'm listening to what's going on around me. So it's looking, for me, it's looking for those type of character traits, because I feel that's a way to really accelerate moving things forward, is to have a strong point of view, but at the same time have the attitude of listening to what others are saying so your point of view gets even stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sorry, go ahead, Julian.
No, you're right.
There's nothing worse, I suppose, on getting a team together and just having a team of yes sayers that that just will only agree with what you say and not have anyone else trying to think outside the box. And I think, as they said, if everyone's thinking the same thing, then someone's not thinking. So and to be a good leader is to listen to those other thoughts and look at the angle.
No, look, it makes sense, and I mean, it raises it doesn't. I was going to say it raises more questions and answers, but it doesn't. And being able to really understand, I always find like to go deeper when you're going through this process of working with and finding people is really handy. And that just brings up that thing, the starter thing we're talking about, when you've got sometimes you've got a very short window to find out about these people, whether it's, I've done interviews in the past where you got 15-minute blocks, and that was the situation that I was in, and I thought, well, this isn't fair. You're going to make a wrong decision in that particular industry. And sure enough, it's just it's like fishing in a, fishing with a barrel with a gun or whatever it is. But yeah, you're going to make mistakes. So, I've learned over the time, which brings up that thing, how often do you bring people back for a second or third interview if need be? I remember I went through a process after I got retrenched in the early 90s with, I think it was I&J Frozen Foods. I filled in this psych test. I sat in the corner and the bloke said, I know everything there is to know about you. What questions do you have? I went, is it a sales rep? I said, what? I'm not asking you any more questions. And I sat there and I went, I don't want to, straight away, I thought, I don't want to work for this business, but that was their process of recruitment. Now, I'm sure it's changed now, but, there's different processes that different companies uses, which are just so screwy. Doesn't make sense to me.
All right, well, we're running out of time, so if I can just wrap up what we've covered in this meeting. There's a lot of information. This is just a fabulous raft of information to draw from, but one of the things we're talking about was firstly being clear about what is needed, the type of the person and the role that they're going to fulfill, where they fit within the organisation, looking at their personality and their character traits, trying to get an assessment of that, their level of passion for the job, having an interview process as well that allows you to identify what are the key things you're looking for, looking at their tenacity and their commitment to completing the work and their self-improvement, their level of emotional intelligence to be able to deal with situations as they arise rather than reacting emotionally, asking them, paying attention to, are they answering questions directly to give an indication as to whether they are committed to what they are doing. And also too, one of the things we talked about was trusting your gut feeling with this and dealing with the situation appropriately. If you do make a mistake, that you deal with that quickly rather than dragging it on, because a lot of times your feeling is right, and dragging it on just allows it to take a lot longer to what the end result was going to be anyway. So hopefully that's been really helpful for everybody. This is Exceptional Effort Business Sunday, talking about finding the right people, looking beyond CVs and LinkedIn profiles. Thank you very much.